Austin Robert Drummond, a 28-year-old man from Jackson, Tennessee, is a prime suspect in a chilling quadruple homicide that shook the small town of Tiptonville in July 2025. Accused of brutally murdering four family members James M. Wilson, Adrianna Williams, Cortney Rose, and Braydon Williams, and abandoning a 7-month-old baby in a stranger's front yard, Drummond's crimes have left the community reeling in fear and disbelief. He faces charges of 4 counts of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, and multiple firearms offenses. In this documentary, we dive deep into the twisted psyche of Drummond, unraveling the psychological and psychoanalytic forces behind his heinous acts, exploring why he committed these atrocities, and what drove him to such unimaginable violence. Why focus on Austin Robert Drummond? Because his crimes aren't just brutal. They're a psychological enigma, a dark puzzle that demands to be dissected. The sheer savagery of his actions, the calculated execution of 4 family members, gunned down in cold blood, and the haunting image of a helpless infant left in a car seat on a stranger's lawn, screams for a deeper understanding. This isn't your run-of-the-mill crime story. It's a descent into a mind so warped, so fractured, that it defies comprehension. On July 29th, 2025, in Tiptonville, Tennessee, Drummond allegedly shot his girlfriend's sister, Cortney Rose, her children Adrianna and Braydon Williams, and Adrianna's boyfriend, James Wilson, leaving their bodies strewn across a wooded area like discarded relics. The baby, Adrianna and James' 7-month-old daughter, was found 40 miles away, abandoned in a car seat, her tiny cries piercing the quiet of a stranger's yard. The precision, the personal connection, the audacity. It's a case that begs for psychological scrutiny, a chance to peer into the abyss of a killer's soul. Let's start at the beginning, because no one wakes up one day and decides to wipe out an entire family. Austin Drummond's story is a slow burn, a life marked by chaos, rebellion, and a psyche teetering on the edge. Born in Jackson, Tennessee, in 1997, Drummond grew up in a world that, from what we can piece together, was far from stable. Public records and local accounts paint a picture of a troubled childhood, fragmented family ties, economic hardship, and a community where opportunities were scarce. Psychologically, this is where the cracks begin to form. Attachment theory tells us that early instability, absent parents, inconsistent caregiving can plant seeds of distrust and rage. Drummond's early years likely lacked the secure bonds that anchor most of us to empathy and morality. Instead, he was left with a void, one that festered over time, turning inward into a volatile mix of resentment and disconnection. By adolescence, Drummond was already on a collision course with the law. At 16, he robbed a Circle K convenience store in Jackson, brandishing a pistol and making off with a measly $44. This wasn't just a crime of opportunity. It was a cry for control, a hallmark of someone grappling with powerlessness. Psychoanalytically, this act screams of a fractured ego, a desperate attempt to assert dominance in a world that had likely made him feel small. The robbery landed him a 13-year sentence, and prison became his crucible. Behind bars, he didn't reform, he hardened. Reports indicate he was charged with attempted murder, while incarcerated, allegedly targeting another inmate. This wasn't a one-off, it was a pattern. Drummond was spiraling into what psychologists call an antisocial personality disorder, characterized by a lack of remorse, impulsivity, and a chilling disregard for others' lives. So, what makes someone like Drummond tick? Let's break it down. Antisocial personality disorder isn't just a fancy term. It's a blueprint for someone who feels no guilt, no empathy, just a cold, calculating drive to get what they want. People with ASPD often have a history of conduct issues in childhood. Think fights, truancy, or cruelty to animals. While we don't have confirmed reports of Drummond torturing pets, his early robbery suggests a reckless disregard for consequences, a trait that only deepened in prison. Psychoanalytically, we can look to Freud's concept of the ID, the primal, instinctual part of the psyche that craves instant gratification. In Drummond, the ID seems to have run the show, unchecked by a weak superego, the moral compass most of us develop through socialization. But ASPD alone doesn't explain the massacre. There's something darker at play, narcissistic rage, perhaps narcissistic personality traits, often co-occurring with ASPD. can manifest as explosive anger when someone feels slighted or humiliated. Drummond's girlfriend was reportedly Cortney Rose's sister, meaning he was intimately connected to the victims. A relative's Facebook post described him as nothing short of amazing to us and our kids, which makes the betrayal even more gut-wrenching. Was there perceived betrayal? A family dispute that pushed him over the edge? Psychoanalysts might argue that Drummond's rage was a projection of his own insecurities, a need to destroy those who represented a threat to his fragile sense of self. Picture this. July 29th, 2025, Tiptonville, Tennessee. A quiet, rural town where neighbors know each other's names. The sun is setting, casting long shadows over Carrington Road. Then, gunfire shatters the silence. For bodies, Cortney Rose, Adrianna Williams, Braydon Williams, and James Wilson lie crumpled in a wooded area, blood pooling beneath them. Court records confirm they were shot, their lives snuffed out with brutal efficiency. The scene is chaos, a tableau of violence, so raw it feels like the air itself is screaming. Witnesses later reported hearing gunshots, but no one saw the killer's face, just a shadow slipping into the night. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation called it a target attack, not random, but personal. Drummond knew his victims, and that intimacy makes the horror even more visceral. Now imagine the baby, a 7-month-old girl, strapped in a car seat, left in a stranger's front yard in Tigrit, 40 miles away. The image is haunting. A tiny, vulnerable life, abandoned in the fading light, her cries unanswered until a passerby stumbles upon her. TBI director David Roche called this act a sign of compassion. But don't be fooled. From a psychological perspective, this wasn't mercy. It was manipulation. Leaving the baby alive could have been Drummond's twisted way of asserting control, a message to the world that he could choose life or death. It's the kind of power play you see in psychopaths, who thrive on bending reality to their will. The choice of victims is where the psychological puzzle deepens. Cortney Rose, 38, was the matriarch, a mother figure. Adrianna Williams, 20, and James Wilson, 21, were young parents, their lives just beginning. Braydon Williams, 15, was a teenager, barely old enough to drive. They weren't strangers, they were family, tied to Drummond through his girlfriend, Cortney's sister. This wasn't a random rampage. It was a calculated erasure of a family unit. Psychologically, this screams of a personal vendetta. Perhaps Drummond saw them as obstacles, threats to his relationship, or symbols of a life he could never have. Family annihilation crimes, where a perpetrator wipes out an entire family, often stem from a need to destroy what the killer feels they've lost or been denied. In Drummond's case, his girlfriend's family may have represented stability, love, or acceptance, things his fractured psyche couldn't process. From a psychoanalytic lens, we can turn to object relations theory. This framework suggests that our relationships with others are shaped by early experiences with caregivers. If Drummond's childhood was marked by rejection or abandonment, he might have internalized a family as a source of pain. Killing them could have been his way of obliterating that pain, externalizing his inner chaos. The choice to spare the baby, however, adds another layer. Was it guilt, a fleeting moment of humanity? Or was it, as some psychologists might argue, a calculated act to deflect suspicion, to paint himself as less monstrous? The truth lies buried in his psyche, a place we can only glimpse through the lens of science. The method, gunshots, precise and lethal, tells us as much about Drummond as the victims he chose. Firearms are impersonal, allowing distance between killer and victim. Unlike a knife, which requires intimacy and physical exertion, a gun lets you kill without feeling the weight of the act. Psychologically, this suggests Drummond wanted efficiency, not emotional connection. He wasn't savoring the act like a serial killer might. He was executing a plan. The wooded area in Tiptonville, isolated and quiet, was the perfect stage for his rage. The bodies were found hours after the baby's abandonment, suggesting he moved quickly, methodically, covering his tracks by dumping his car in Jackson, 75 miles away. Police reports and surveillance footage paint a chilling picture of Drummond's mindset post-murder. On August 4th, 2025, cameras caught him in Jackson, dressed in camouflage, clutching a black rifle, trying to break into a church. The image is pure menace, a man on the run, not just from the law but from his own demons. The choice of a church as a target is telling. Psychoanalytically, it could symbolize a desperate grasp for redemption, a subconscious acknowledgement of his sins. Or maybe it was just a place to hide. Either way, it shows a man unraveling, his carefully laid plans crumbling under the weight of his own paranoia. For a week, Tennessee was a pressure cooker of fear. Drummond was on the TBI's most wanted list, a $32,500 reward dangling for his capture. His white 2016 Audi A3 was found abandoned in Jackson, followed by a 1988 Ford pickup truck in Dyer County. The community was on edge, schools locked down, residents warned to bolt their doors. On August 5, 2025, it all came to a head. A man working near Saddlebrook Drive in Jackson spotted a figure in the woods. Drummond, sweat-soaked, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Within minutes, police swarmed the area, and at 9:05 a.m. they had him. The image of Drummond in custody, staring sheepishly at the ground, is a stark contrast to the monster who terrorized the town. 3 others, Tanaka Brown, Giovant Thomas, and De'Ara Sanders, were arrested for helping him evade capture, charged with accessory after the fact. Brown faced an additional charge of tampering with evidence. Their involvement suggests Drummond wasn't entirely alone, possibly tied to the Vice Lord's gang, as investigators suspected. This network of enablers points to a charismatic, manipulative side of Drummond, a trait common in those with ASPD. He could charm, control, convince others to risk their freedom for him. But now, the game was over. What drives a man to such darkness? Let's pull back the curtain. Drummond's criminal history, armed robbery at 16, attempted murder in prison, shows a lifelong struggle with impulse control and authority. Psychologically, this aligns with a concept called the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Drummond's actions suggest all 3. His narcissism fueled his need for control, his Machiavellianism showed in his manipulation of others, and his psychopathy was evident in his utter lack of remorse. The baby's abandonment, while seemingly compassionate, fits this profile. It was a calculated move to throw off investigators, not a moral awakening. But there's more. Trauma theories suggest that unprocessed pain from childhood can manifest as violence later in life. If Drummond grew up feeling unloved or powerless, his crimes might have been a warped attempt to reclaim agency. Killing his girlfriend's family could have been his way of severing ties to a world that rejected him, a final, catastrophic act of defiance. And yet, the baby's survival nags at us. Was it a flicker of humanity, or just another chess move? We may never know, but it's a question that haunts. Drummond's story ends not with a bang, but with a whimper, handcuffed, head bowed, a man who thought he could outrun his own darkness. Philosophically, his downfall speaks to the human condition, to the eternal struggle between free will and fate. Existentialist thinkers like Sartre would argue that Drummond's choices defined him. He wasn't destined to kill, but chose to let his rage consume him. Yet, from a deterministic perspective, his life of trauma, poverty, and incarceration might have made this path almost inevitable. His crimes force us to confront uncomfortable questions. Are monsters born, or are they made? Is redemption possible for someone so far gone? District Attorney Danny Goodman hinted at seeking the death penalty, a decision that looms like a shadow over Drummond's future. If convicted, he'll face either a life in a cage or the ultimate punishment. Philosophically, this raises a question of justice versus vengeance. Does executing Drummond heal the wounds he inflicted? Or does it simply perpetuate a cycle of violence? His story is a mirror, reflecting our own fears about the darkness within us all. As he awaits trial, the community of Tiptonville grapples with grief, fear, and the haunting realization that evil can wear a familiar face. The scars left by Austin Drummond won't fade easily. Families mourn, a baby grows up without parents, and a small town questions its safety. Psychologically, his crimes remind us that the human mind is a labyrinth, beautiful, complex, and sometimes terrifyingly dark. His story is a warning. Unchecked trauma, a lack of empathy, and a life of resentment can forge a monster. As we close this chapter, we're left with a chilling truth. The line between man and monster is thinner than we'd like to believe. Drummond's face, once trusted, now feared, will haunt Tennessee for years to come, a reminder that sometimes the worst horrors come from those we thought we knew.